Imagine a team with four of the youngest, brightest minds in the NFL, all on one coaching staff, under a head coach who had already won 2 Super Bowls. Well, that's exactly what the Redskins had back in 2013, and somehow they managed to go 3-13. Looking back, that Washington team had one of the greatest coaching staffs ever. It had the perfect mix of experience and young talent, and two-time Super Bowl champion Mike Shanahan was the head coach leading the way. His defensive coordinator, Jim Haslett, was the head coach of the Saints in the early 2000s, and even won AP Coach of the Year at one point. Shanahan and Haslett brought plenty to the table after years of experience, but the story looking back at that staff is the guys that went on to make an impact on the league. At offensive coordinator was Mike Shanahan's son, Kyle Shanahan. Kyle is the current head coach of the 49ers, whom he's already led to a Super Bowl in his 5-year tenure this far. He is one of the brightest minds in all of football, and that was apparent when he helped the Falcons to a Super Bowl appearance in 2016 as their offensive coordinator. Safe to say that Kyle had some damn good positional coaches under him, including the guy that Shanahan brought with him every step of the way after Washington, Mike McDaniel. McDaniel just got hired as the Dolphins' next head coach, but before that, he was the offensive coordinator for the 49ers under Kyle. The quarterback's coach was Matt LaFleur, the current Packers head coach, who has led Green Bay to a 39-10 record in his first 3 seasons. LaFleur has already proven that he's the real deal, turning around a team that Mike McCarthy impressively managed to waste for some time. LaFleur served as the Titans offensive coordinator before Green Bay, and before that, he was the offensive coordinator for the Rams under Sean McVay, who, you guessed it, was on that Washington coaching staff as the tight ends coach. McVay is a man who needs no introduction. He's taken the NFL by storm and has already coached the Rams to 2 Super Bowls. Sean McVay ended up staying in Washington even after Mike Shanahan was fired, and ultimately ended up being the offensive coordinator for Jay Gruden before he finally left for Los Angeles. And I just remember him taking that job and leaving Washington, and you just knew that he was going to be the one that got away. McVay has only been a head coach for 5 years and already has an impressive coaching tree of his own, including the guy he'll shake hands with on Sunday, Zac Taylor. After McVay had an insane amount of success early in his head coaching career, teams started trying to chase the next McVay, including the Bengals, who hired Taylor, McVay's quarterback's coach in Los Angeles. Sunday is going to represent the peak of the Sean McVay coaching tree, with the 36-year-old already having to face off against one of his former assistants in the Super Bowl. It's no secret that many of Zac Taylor's philosophies date back to McVay. The Rams and Bengals ran the most 11 personnel, 1 running back, 1 tight end, 3 wide receiver set this season. Plus, Matthew Stafford and Joe Burrow threw for the most yards this year out of an empty pocket. The big game may come down to the coaching decisions and adjustments by McVay and Taylor, which may come as an advantage to the Bengals. When the two coached together, McVay was always calling the shots. Taylor knows how he wants to adapt and what his scheme boils down to. For McVay, well, Taylor had never been a coordinator before taking the Cincinnati job. The majority of his growth and experience as a coach has come in the last 3 years, and now he has a chance to win a Super Bowl before the mastermind that helped him get there. Safe to say that things have worked out for Taylor. He's about to coach in a Super Bowl in his 3rd season as a head coach, but he isn't the only guy under McVay to go on to have success. Chargers head coach Brandon Staley was McVay's defensive coordinator for the Rams before he was hired last cycle. Plus, the Rams' current offensive coordinator, for only a few more days probably, Kevin O'Connell, is reportedly going to be the next head coach of the Vikings. Before O'Connell went to be McVay's offensive coordinator in Los Angeles, he was the offensive coordinator in Washington. A lot of coaching success has resulted just from that 2013 Redskins team, and we could see yet another head coach from that staff if current Rams defensive coordinator Raheem Morris gets looks next cycle. Some teams did look at him for their vacancy this offseason, and back in 2013, he was the defensive backs coach in Washington. The 2013 Redskins are going to go down in history, but not because they were any good. They sucked, actually. Washington lost its last 8 games and went 3-13. It was the worst franchise record since 1994, and it led to Mike Shanahan getting fired at the end of the year, and most of his staff left with him. The season was a drama-filled mess after Robert Griffin III's injury and having Kirk Cousins go 0-3 in relief. The legacy of that coaching staff is forever going to be remembered for that bad 2013 season, but what sometimes gets lost in translation is what happened the year before, the year that I consider to be my favorite NFL season ever. 1 year removed from a 5-11 season, Washington traded up in the draft to take a swing on a quarterback, Robert Griffin III. The build-up to the season was all around RG3, and it got off to a banging start. In week 1, RG3 outdueled Drew Brees and put up 40 points to down the Saints in the Superdome. There aren't many sports moments that are more ingrained in my head than RG3 stepping back to pass and finding Pierre Garçon for an 88-yard touchdown, and then just the scene of RG3 laying on the ground with his hands up after his first career touchdown. It was a moment of hope, but there was still a long way to go. Washington lost its next 6 of 8 and entered the bye at 3-6. It was a bad start to the season, but RG3 was showing more and more promise by the day until it finally clicked. The Redskins came out of the bye and steamrolled the Eagles and went on to win their next 5 after to set up a huge winner-take-all for the division matchup against the Cowboys in Week 17. One of the most memorable games of my life. Rookie running back Alfred Morris went for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns as Washington beat Dallas for their first division title since 1999, literally the year I was born. There is no way that a team with that kind of coaching talent should have only won 3 games, but it's not like Washington never had success. The Redskins put everything together in 2012 for a brief amount of time, but the legacy of that staff is represented by the Mike Shanahan coaching tree. Mike Shanahan has built his own branch of the coaching tree that includes former Chargers head coach Anthony Lynn and Gary Kubiak, who won a Super Bowl as the Broncos head coach. Plus, Kubiak went on to mentor former Broncos head coach Vance Joseph and current Jets head coach Robert Saleh. You can trace almost every current NFL coach back to a genius football mind that helped shape their coaching philosophy. For some coaches, it's easy to trace back. Bill Belichick worked directly under Bill Parcells. John Harbaugh's tree gets a little more complicated though. He worked for Andy Reid, who coached under Mike Holmgren, who was the offensive coordinator for 3-time Super Bowl champion Bill Walsh during the 49ers dynasty. Plenty of current head coaches fall under the umbrella of Mike Shanahan, but even his tree extends up to a few Hall of Fame coaches. Shanahan was an assistant under Dan Reeves in Denver. Reeves only worked under one head coach as an assistant, 2-time Super Bowl champion Tom Landry, who spent 29 years as the head coach of the Cowboys. And Reeves' coaching tree of his own includes new Saints head coach Dennis Allen. When you look at the offenses run by Mike Shanahan and his protégés, it's not hard to find where the scheme traces back to. Bill Walsh. Shanahan was Walsh's offensive coordinator in 1994 when the Niners won the Super Bowl with Steve Young. Walsh ran his own version of the West Coast offense in the 1980s and 90s, and it's obvious that a lot of those roots were present in Mike Shanahan's offense in Denver and coaches later down the tree like Sean McVay. Of course, every coach's offense looks a little different, but that's what makes a great coach. Adaptation. The game changes over time, and so do coaching philosophies, but the roots of that old Bill Walsh West Coast offense are still clear, and they will be on Sunday. From one legendary Joe to another, the Mike Shanahan coaching tree lives on.